and sing country songs. And there were other people, when I was in Johnny Cash's band, he was a fellow that could always work over here.
The greatest love story in country music wasn't splashed across headlines, but quietly unfolded behind closed doors, built not on fame, but on grief, patience, and a promise made by a 12-year-old boy. For much of his life, Marty Stuart lived with a promise in his heart. One made when he was just a boy of 12, standing backstage at a county fair in Mississippi. It was there he first saw Connie Smith, already a star in her own right, glowing under the stage lights with a presence that struck him with awe. To the world, she was a country music icon, but to young Marty, she seemed otherworldly, like a vision sent from the heavens. He turned to his mother and declared with certainty, "One day, I'm going to marry her." His mother laughed. So did everyone else, even Connie. But Marty wasn't joking. It was more than a crush. It was destiny. No one could have known then that this wide-eyed boy, already touring as a musical prodigy with legends like Lester Flatt, would one day fulfill that childhood vow. The years in between would see Marty rise to the ranks of country music, earning acclaim, awards, and respect from the industry's giants. But even as he stood in the spotlight, he never forgot Connie. He watched her from afar as her star burned bright and then dimmed, as she withdrew from the scene to raise her children, retreating from the exhausting glare of fame and wrestling with a private ache the public never saw. Connie had weathered storms most people couldn't imagine. She had known early success, then deep loneliness, personal losses, and the relentless pressure of navigating a male-dominated industry. Her voice, full of raw, trembling emotion, carried the weight of those struggles. Marty understood that. He admired not just her music, but the quiet, wounded strength beneath it. When they reconnected decades later at a tribute concert, the timing finally aligned. Connie, older and more guarded, was surprised to see how much Marty had changed, how the boy had become a man, not just a performer, but someone rooted deeply in tradition, reverence, and resolve. They began spending time together again. Marty never pushed. He didn't have to. His life had been a slow build toward this moment, a life lived in a kind of quiet preparation. He didn't just want to be with Connie. He wanted to honor her story, her legacy, and the pain she carried. In 1997, after years of subtle pursuit and shared trust, they married. It was more than a union. It was a closing of a profound loop, a divine culmination of patience, purpose, and unshakable devotion. Yet their marriage wasn't a perfect fairy tale. Beneath the public smiles and matching stage outfits was a deeply private world built on understanding, silence, and, at times, sorrow. Marty had seen firsthand what fame could do to love. He'd watched icons like Johnny Cash and June Carter navigate the cracks that success could create. He had no illusions about what it meant to protect someone you loved in an industry that often devoured its own. Connie, for all her legendary status, carried quiet scars. She had once walked away from everything: fame, fortune, even opportunity, choosing instead the stillness of motherhood and the solitude of a life away from microphones. But Marty knew that her voice, her spirit, still had so much left to say. Gently, without ever forcing it, he started bringing her back, not in grand gestures, but through small, intentional moments. A duet here, a guest appearance there, a mention in interviews, an invitation on tour. His stage became hers, not for his ego, but to remind the world of what they'd nearly forgotten. There was, however, one thing they never spoke of publicly: a loss. Private, quiet, and heartbreaking. Close friends whispered of a pregnancy that ended in tragedy, a dream that never fully materialized. It was never confirmed, never detailed, but hovered around their story like a ghost. In one rare moment, Marty offered a glimpse into that sorrow, saying, "Some songs you never finish writing. You just hum the melody for the rest of your life." Whether he meant that loss or the aching beauty of his love for Connie, no one can say for sure. But that pain was real enough for him to build a small chapel on their property, a private sanctuary where, even today, they go to sit, just the two of them, and the quiet memory of something they never share with the world. Their life away from the stage was far removed from the glittering image fans might expect. They were reclusive at times, often going months without public appearances. Their home in Tennessee became a refuge, surrounded by nature and peace, a space for healing. Marty, who had long collected artifacts from country music's past, turned his passion into preservation. He created a museum, not just of items, but of memories, proof that the soul of country music was worth saving. In truth, it was more than preservation. It was control. Control over which stories got told, which pain was hidden, which memories were honored, and which were buried. There were moments of tension, too. One recording session in 2002 was abruptly ended after Connie heard a song that hit too close to home. Neither of them ever spoke of it again. But from that day forward, something shifted. Connie stopped attending some of Marty's shows. He traveled alone more often. The whispers of separation swirled. But then they'd appear at a gospel event, hand in hand, as if nothing had changed. Two performers still in harmony, even when the silence said more than any song could. Connie had always been a symbol of quiet strength. Her beauty, her poise, her voice, clear as church bells, once defined a golden era of country music. But few knew the deep inner battles she fought during those years. Her mental health struggles, the loneliness of fame, the loss that shaped her. When Marty married her, he didn't just join her life, he joined her grief. Sometimes she would sit silently for days, triggered by a melody or memory. Marty never asked her to snap out of it. He sat with her. No words, no pressure, just presence. He once told a friend, she doesn't need saving. She needs someone to understand why she stopped asking to be saved. That understanding shaped their life together. In a rare 2022 interview, Marty shared a moment that shook him. After a long tour, he returned home to find Connie sitting in the dark, holding an old photo of herself on the Opry stage. She looked at him and said, "Sometimes I don't recognize that girl. Sometimes I miss her. And sometimes I don't know who she was at all." In that moment, Marty realized that his mission wasn't to reignite Connie's career. It was to guard her peace. He turned down lucrative tour offers, stopped asking her to record. Instead, they built their life around stillness, prayer, family, and the small, sacred rhythms of domestic joy. Long breakfasts, vinyl records, quiet evenings on the porch. A sanctuary not built of applause, but of trust and healing. Their home became a place where other broken souls found rest. Forgotten legends, young dreamers, weary artists, they came through, sat at Marty and Connie's table, shared their pain, and left lighter. It was never publicized, never monetized, just lived, quietly and sincerely. Marty's evolution from performer to protector changed everything about his art. He stopped chasing the spotlight. Instead, he lifted others into it. He told stories of the forgotten, paid tribute to the overlooked, and always he returned to Connie. She was his muse, his quiet fire, the thread that ran through every note he played. He once said, "Country music doesn't always honor its own. Sometimes it chews them up and buries them in forgotten verses." And with that realization, he made it his mission to save the verses no one sang anymore. He built the Congress of Country Music in Mississippi, not for fame, but for memory. He collected stories like sacred relics. He recorded Connie's voice at home, not for the world, but for love. In those private moments, she would sing softly, and he'd capture it, not for profit, but for the soul of it. That was Marty's true artistry. Now, at 66, Marty reflects not on awards or achievements, but on love. In a recent interview, when asked what his proudest accomplishment was, he simply said, "That she lets me love her." That answer, quiet and unpolished, says everything. What most don't know is that he almost lost her early in their relationship. The wounds Connie carried made her question everything. Trust was hard. Fame had taken so much. But Marty never pressured her. He simply waited. And eventually she came back. To him. To herself. Together. They built a life far from stage lights. Brick by brick. Day by day. Their love wasn't about spectacle. It was about rescue. About surviving the parts of fame that no one talks about. About sitting in the ashes and choosing to stay. They laughed. They cried. They prayed. They held each other when the world turned loud. And they found a quiet peace that Nashville could never offer. Marty opening up now isn't about promotion. It's not a rollout. It's a requiem for the years that nearly broke them, for the love that saved them, and for the silent places where healing began. And yet, even with all they had overcome, the quiet weight of time remained a presence in their home, hovering in the corners like old dust on vinyl grooves. Love, even in its most tender forms, must bend under pressure of aging bodies and memories that fade like film. Connie, now in her 80s, sometimes drifted off mid-thought, her words trailing behind her eyes as if she were listening to voices from another time. Marty noticed these changes, not with panic, but with reverence. He became more than a husband. He became a keeper time, a witness to every subtle shift in her being, every soft repetition in her stories, every pause that lingered too long. He knew her history not just because he loved her, but because he had studied her life like scripture. There were moments when he would hum her old hits to her gently, like a lullaby, and watch her eyes sparkle in recognition, as if a forgotten part of her soul had been coaxed back into the light. He never corrected her when she misplaced a detail or forgot a name. He simply listened, because listening in love is sometimes the holiest act. And in their home, it was through music that memories were stored and retrieved. They would sit on the porch in the golden hush of late afternoon, a weathered record spinning inside, and let the past arrive not as pain, but as warmth. Their dog would curl up at their feet. A breeze would stir the curtains. And in that suspended silence, Marty would often think, this is what I was meant for, not the Opry stage, not the awards, not the interviews or museum exhibits, but this moment, this woman, this grace. And yet, he never stopped honoring her in the public sphere. In every interview, every tribute, every show where he spoke a country music soul, he always circled back to her, not as a footnote, but as the foundation. To Marty, Connie wasn't just the first love of his heart. She was a moral compass of the genre, the heartbeat of every sad, lonesome song that ever made someone feel seen. And perhaps that was why he continued to collect not just instruments and records, but moments, photographs, handwritten lyrics, old set lists, because he knew someday, when the world looked back, someone would need to understand who she really was. Not just a legend, but the woman. The mother who gave up the stage to raise her kids, the survivor of quiet battles, the one who endured heartbreak in satin dresses and kept singing anyway. Marty knew fame was a fragile currency. Legacy was different. Legacy required stewardship. And so, he became her steward, not just of her career, but of her dignity, of her softness, of her sadness. When she wept on anniversaries, they never spoke of, he wept with her. When she lit a candle for a child, they never got a hold. He bowed his head too. They never built a nursery, but they built a chapel. And in that chapel, Marty kept a small journal, a simple black book where he wrote down the things she said when she didn't think anyone was listening, phrases that would vanish otherwise, thoughts too beautiful or broken to survive in conversation. One entry read, "I don't sing as high as I used to, but sometimes I still hear the note in my dreams." Another said, simply, "Tell them I was more than a voice." He planned to publish the journal one day, not as a memoir, but as a hymn, a private gospel of loving someone fully through the shadows and the light. And maybe that's what love becomes when the spotlight fades. A quiet devotion, a series of ordinary moments made sacred through consistency, presence, and gentleness. As the years wore on, friends noticed a change in Marty. His fire hadn't dimmed. It had deepened. There was a gravity to him now, a stillness earned not through age but through surrender. He had learned the hardest truth of all, that loving someone who has suffered means holding space for what you cannot fix. And in doing so, he found the truest version of himself, not as a country star, but as a man who kept his promise. A promise made when he was 12, and kept not through grand gestures, but through decades of quiet, enduring grace. And when the day comes that the world says goodbye to either of them, what remains will not be just the songs or the stories or the stages they stood on. It will be this unspoken truth, that some love stories are written not in public, but in the private, hidden corners of a life, in shared silences, in held hands, in nights spent waiting for the pain to pass, in the way two souls, battered but unbroken, chose again and again to stay. Behind every rhinestone, behind every show, behind every historic recording, there was Connie, her pain, her strength, her silence. And now, perhaps Marty sees clearly that the thing he was chasing all along wasn't fame or music. It was her, Connie Smith, not just a woman, but the embodiment of everything country music was meant to be: sacred, raw, honest, and true. In the end, Marty Stuart's greatest legacy may not be his stage presence, his preservation efforts, or even his brilliant catalog. It may be this: a love story told not in headlines, but in hymns, a marriage not built on ambition, but on understanding, a sanctuary made of silence, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that live quietly between the verses. That if this moved you, leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're drawn to the hidden chapters behind music's legends, subscribe for more stories like this one. Because as Marty once said, not every love story needs to be loud. Some are meant to echo quietly, forever,